All right, good evening. Call the meeting to order at 6:03. Ask if you join. Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Minutes of December 4th, 2019. What is the wish?
As written.
Second. Any corrections or changes? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We don't have an agenda review.
No, we do not.
It's on B.
Yes, we do.
It's after public comments. Public comments. Seeing none. Agenda review. Mr. Langlois.
If I can have 10 seconds at some point just to update about the budget. By the MDC process.
Absolutely. You want to do it at the beginning of warrant articles?
I can do it whenever you'd like, Mr. Chair.
All right. Why don't we do it at the beginning of warrant articles because it's kind of budget related anyway. Anything else? Changes? Anybody want to move anything up? Anything down? Consent items, do you have any?
No.
Facilities updates. Is Mike joining us or is that?
Today. I met with him over the week and a half to kind of pull things together, but a couple things going on. I don't know where the kitchen lies in the facilities update.
Downstairs.
Right, so we're gonna keep it there.
Okay.
But we're looking at some equipment that is 30 years old, including a single convection oven, a Garland range oven with 6 burners, and a Hobart single compartment dish machine. Those are the 3 major equipment pieces in the cafeteria or lunchroom, whatever. And so Meredith, sorry, I didn't think it was going to come this quickly. Went through and has done some priority ranking for some equipment replacement. So that's something I have. She doesn't have prices or anything like that, but she's not only looking to replace it, but upgrade it as well from a single convection to a double convection, from the range with oven to a warming unit, that type of thing. So getting a top griddle so that she can do the cheeseburgers and the hamburgers on the griddle as opposed to in the broiler. So I have that, and I'm happy to go over anything else that you would like to. But in terms of the facility building, Mike went back to the original study, and we're still looking at the security entrance. That was something that was mentioned by Homeland Security as something that we should consider, having the 3-point system of security coming into the building. So that's one thing that Mike had mentioned. There's a camera out there already. When we had the cameras installed, we made sure that one got out there. So in the future, if that's the direction that the board and this would like to go to, we have that option. We're looking at replacing the exterior doors on the mostly used doors, the main doors down front, and then the side doors. We don't have any costs for any of this, but these are some of the things that are on his list, including the units and any hardware. Talking about working on replacing some of the tiles and the baseboards. The 2 bathrooms that are downstairs by the cafeteria are in need of a rehaul, just gutting them out. It's a pedestal sink and a toilet, painting them, getting that done. And he also talked about we're starting to work on all the toilets and the urinals in both the gang bathrooms and the classroom bathrooms. There's the kitchen ceiling tiles need to be replaced. They're in dire need of replacement. We have to order special sanitary kitchen ceiling tiles for them that can be taken down and cleaned and back up. It's not just one of these cork board things.
Are they currently just cork or what are they now?
That's a good question. I'm sure that they have what they need, but it sounds like some of them need to be replaced. Do you know Candy by any chance? Again, we talked about the skirting around the modular building, as we don't know that that's something that we're looking to move beyond, but that's something that has been talked about again and again of needing to be done. As well as the potential of replacing the carpet with tile inside the modular. I know it's an expense that if we're getting rid of the modulars, that we might not want to make, but definitely skirting around the modulars. He mentioned that some of the windows in the building have some broken seals, so it doesn't affect the function of the window, but it definitely affects the look of it, so he'd like to work on that. He'd like to put mag locks on the gym doors so that we can open them up and keep them open if we need to, instead of opening and shutting them for events that happen in the building. The fire alarm panel needs to be upgraded. Over the summertime, he'd look at regrading and upgrading the parking lot. I know that there's been some conversation about paving, but it definitely needs to be regraded and upgraded. The red shed is in need of either some vinyl siding, or it needs to be painted. It's wearing and needs to have that done. And he also mentioned the roof of the concession stand, the oil shed, and then the alcoves the roof and the alcoves all need to be replaced. So that was the beginning list.
Was he referencing the engineering study that had been
Yeah.
done? Because
Yep.
I know the engineering study had different priorities. Like they had talked about
More of just a time.
like system stuff and a timeline stuff, like dealing with the heating units.
Yep, and that's all been taken care of. All of that stuff, the water heater, the oil, all those things those upgrades have been made.
Right, the unit ventilators was something that we're gonna be coming up at some point.
Right.
Oh, the actual
Just
classroom?
classroom
Yeah,
units, yeah.
okay.
So those were closer to needing attention. I can't remember the exact priority, but they were close to needing attention. Looking at the list he has here, the skirting on the mods is something I think we've talked about in the past, and I believe that is part of should be covered by the company you rent them from.
Yeah, we talked about that in the past, I thought it was.
So-
We had Amber check on that.
I was gonna have the same
And
question
they've
about
done
the
they've
tile
done
floor
carpet
versus
inside for us in the past.
So
Okay.
considering what we've paid for those things, I mean, they're just like little cash cows out there over the years. Can Amber or somebody get a little insistent with them that they can provide whatever contractually they're obligated to do? And become.
And if their windows, it sounded like the windows aren't working out there, that's also their problem.
Yeah, I think that it was, I don't know specifically if they were talking about building or mod. You talking about the seals, the broken seals? Yeah, I'll ask Mike if that's the
But
modulars.
Most certainly, let's look at that contract for the modulars, lease, and see,
Yeah.
but whatever they should be responsible for, let's get them, right, to deal with it.
And I think the last time we kind of ran into a situation like this, and somebody actually called them, they came
They
quickly.
came.
Okay,
I can't remember what that was, it was,
I think they painted it and they carpeted.
Carpet, yeah.
and
And that was like 5 years ago.
there's also some siding that's getting a little tired out there as well. If they're gonna be here, they need to be.
Yeah.
Can I throw a few more questions out? So the mag locks for the gym doors, I think we should get pricing on that and line that up, but I think that should kind of coincide with floors, locks. That's kind of like a rehash of the gym.
okay.
And so we probably just want to kind of focus on it. If there's other stuff that we need to do inside the gym, obviously my mindset is let's get it done before we have all these nice, beautiful new floors put down.
Yep.
The basketball hoops inside the gym, my understanding is we can't raise the side hoops.
No.
They need to be lubricated, loosened up, freed up. They should function. Right, we should be able to raise them out of the way. I know, like, if you're watching a performances, graduation, whatever, if you're in the bleachers, you can't, depending on where you're sitting, you kind of have a bad sight line. So that's something I think we should at least look at. And obviously, if we're up there and we're oil and spraying and doing all sorts of other stuff, I don't want to do that
On the new floor.
on the new floor.
Yep.
So now's the time to, maybe have them start looking at addressing some of that stuff as well, and getting up there with the lift and seeing what needs to be done to make those functional, if the mechanisms need to be reworked, replaced, repaired, on that. I think the rest of the stuff, I think what we need is some rough numbers so we can start kind of prioritizing.
Yeah, I'll be actually interested to see the list for the kitchen replacement and upgrades, because I don't think we had all that much detail in the capital,
That's
in the engineering study.
new, and we have not
So
heard about that yet.
we definitely need numbers and stuff like that so we can insert it and prioritize it with the rest of the stuff appropriately.
I'm sure we get used to what we have and then someone new comes along
It's
and
like, how are you
realizes
working on
it's
this?
30 years
Yeah.
of
I
equipment.
mean, yeah, I didn't realize they didn't have a flat top in there.
Mhm.
There you go.
Because I am who I am. If we're in the
Who are you?
if we're working in the gym, could we upgrade the water fountain? A couple of years, this is not you, a couple of years ago, we talked about having the refrigerated fountains, and we've done 2 of them, which is great. There was one there and the one downstairs, and the other location was like, put the one in between the bathrooms and the gym, make that one. And it logistically was a little bit of a challenge because of getting electricity there, and it just kind of stopped happening. But I'd love to see that happen if we're doing this stuff. Like, that's construction that ahead of the gym floor would be great.
With all the
I think it's time to put a plaque above the water bubbler.
I was just about to say something.
Jim Dealey water filling station.
Yeah, exactly.
I think looking at like, the painting of the shed and stuff like that, honestly, I think we should maybe just look at addressing with putting vinyl siding on both the shed and the oil building shack.
And bundling that into, I'm sure that whoever would be interested in doing that would also be interested in fixing the little roofs on the.
Roofs and the alcoves.
You put that all together, you wind up having more interest than
And it's not a big project, it wouldn't cost a whole lot of
a couple of days.
money. Yeah, I mean, the roofing, you've probably got a day's worth of roofing and a couple days worth of siding and not much of materials. So, I'd reach out from a budgetary number. I'm sure Solid Roots would be willing to come back and at least give you the big number to say, hey, this is your budget number, and at least gives us an idea of what we're looking at. And then we can put a bid out for the work, if we decide to move forward with it. It's not a huge project, it's nothing to get real excited about. The fire alarm system,
Mm-hmm. The panel,
the panel.
which is in the office.
That's a fairly large project, if I recall correctly, because the current panel is becoming obsolete.
What makes a panel obsolete?
The way it communicates.
The magic inside it, I guess, right? So that's going to be obviously, I think that was a much larger project, because I think that affected the rest of the stuff that communicates with that panel also that needed to be, it's not just the panel, I think it's basically like the whole fire alarm system.
It's wonky, the fire alarm, there's different sounds coming from different things, and I don't know if that will fix it or not. I
Well, I
have
mean,
no idea what we're talking about for cost either.
So I think that being my safety, I tend to want to prioritize over other things, so that's probably another thing I want a budgetary number on.
But we have money to work off of.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, so I mean, the money's there, so let's.
So I didn't hear anything on your list that sounds like something we shouldn't address. So if they want to come with numbers, so that we can start sorting out how we spend the funding that was given last year, that would be great.
What do we have, 250 or?
We were given 75 last year. I think an additional 75, or was it 150?
I'm just gonna pull it up and
Blurs.
Last year's warrants are in there, I think.
your fund balances are all in there.
But we have a significant amount in that fund to do work.
Would that fall under Homeland Security? Would there be a grant for any of that stuff?
For the doors, there might be.
I would think for this,
Any communication plans?
yeah.
I think it's that money is, the money that we got our stuff from goes until December 30th, is it?
I think, yeah, I'm not sure if there's gonna be another round of funding.
Yeah.
There were people on the wait list and I have not heard that anymore was being released
Did we use
Oh, it's
what we were
possible.
given?
Yeah, we used it for the cameras.
So at the,
in the walkie-talkies.
We ended up not getting that, getting
Oh.
waitlisted on that, so we used the budget.
so at the moment, we have 370 grand basically in the repair fund. And then the other, we have 25 in
The new stuff.
the equipment installation trust. But the facilities repair, we have 370. We had a target of trying to keep about, and most certainly don't have to, but we were trying to keep about 200 in there for our eventual needs for roof. And at some point, maybe we look at biting the bullet and we have knocked out that way as well. I mean, that's another thing. So I maybe ask Mike, I know we had the roof repaired, whenever there's an issue, we have it repaired. Do we have any active leaks right now that you are aware of?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I think you probably want to wait at this point to
Look at handling that with,
or at least get the advice of if we're going to move forward with getting an architect or some sort of structural advisor in here, let them guide you in terms of
That's fine.
spending money on the roof
just as soon stretch the roof.
as much as you can.
Yeah, I just don't want it to damage other.
I don't think there will ever be, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think there'll ever be a catastrophic all at once failure of this roof.
No, it's gonna be
It's an
it's gonna be leaks and it's gonna be cosmetic damage it causes for the most part. I mean, it's a concrete steel building.
Without a torch down rubber roof.
Yeah, the building's not going anywhere structurally. It's not like you're buying timbers and framing and stuff.
I think you will have warning when it's coming. All right, anything else on facilities? Fiscal year 2020 update.
So Amber ran a report today and the bottom line was 158. That's conservative because she projected that money would all be spent. So as we go further in, more will be released, but for right now, that was what she was comfortable with.
158
158,000.
extra.
Yes, surplus.
Surplus.
And then there's also, you've already got extra revenue. I can't remember what the amount was. I'll see if I can find it, but there was definitely extra revenue. I'm not sure what number it is. That will help too.
Excellent. Any questions on fiscal year 20? Well, that's not 2020. That's actually 2019, isn't it?
It's 19.
1920.
Yeah.
All right, that brings us to storage building, fire safety.
So the amount, I think it was 7,700, right?
6950, 7370. I'm sorry, the total amount of 7370.
So, I think we had talked about looking at our fund balance and determining whether or not we were gonna take that out of the budget, or perhaps look at the equipment trust. So, Amber checked your equipment trust to make sure that the definition when it was established would not preclude us from using that, and we could use that. We can certainly decide to move forward with this and then see how your budget's doing, and you can always decide later in the year, let's have a public hearing and decide to take the money out of the trust to use for this. So you don't have to take it from the trust now, you can make that decision a little bit later if you'd like, but you can still move forward with the project.
Let's move it out of the budget.
Do you want to make a motion, sir?
I would like it.
I move 7370 for the fire alarm system in the storage facility.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Anything else with the storage building? Are we in, now that we are, I think that was the last hurdle in order to use it. Could we ask if we can get a timeline for installation of this, and if the Fire chief is comfortable now knowing that this is going to be installed for us to start moving things in immediately.
I have a letter to give to him.
Yeah, just drafted a letter.
Okay.
Do you wanna have, who's gonna contact the contractor, see when they can get it in?
Either I can have Mike do it.
That's fine. It might have been working with the guy anyway. So I guess just get a hold of the guy and see how quickly he can get that done, so it's just done and out of the way, and we can move on. That was RB Lewis,
And I would hope that the fire chief has the flexibility to go ahead and let us put things in there knowing that all of their fire things are going to get taken care of. Because the guy can't do it for 2 months.
Right.
All right, 6th grade trip. What did we budget for next year? 10,000 to go towards the cost of the trip? So I would make a motion that we approve $10,000 out of this budget to offset the cost of the 6th grade trip.
How much more is this camp than the old camp?
This one is 475. The old one was in the mid to high twos, I believe.
I think it was about 340.
I thought it was like one something more than the other one.
Yeah.
Brian would know, I can't remember.
I'll text.
And how many kids are in that current 6th grade, do we know? Well, I guess I know, just have to pull it up.
Google binder.
Pull my Google binder.
Nice binder, thank you.
You're welcome.
These binders are magnificent.
Thank Kathy, because she's basically full-time binder woman this week with all the districts.
There's high school. Surplus, trust funds. 2019 this year in 5th grade, 6th grade. Oh, where's 6th grade? It's not on that sheet. It's not on the sheet. Middle school.
Yeah, not that one. That middle school's not broken up. It should be on a different sheet.
Oh,
It's not on that
2019
one.
6th grade. There's 50 of them. Okay. There'll be 67 next year. So they asked for 10 grand. There's 17 more kids next year, and they asked for 10 grand for that. So.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem with adding money, I just, in fairness to the families that participated beforehand, I just wanna try to equalize it out, so if it's $150 more than it was, and we have, what did you say it was, we have 60 kids this year?
50 kids.
50 kids, sorry. I just wanna, it'd be a, was that $7,500? Yeah, 70. Yeah, whatever that number is, just, I don't wanna.
So nobody has seconded my motion at this point. So I can withdraw my motion.
I just,
And I will resubmit my motion to offset the cost at 7,500 rather than.
or I would, yeah, I mean,
Alright, so I made a motion before you get into it. Is there anybody who's going to second my motion? No one is going to second my motion, so nice. Alright, onward.
hold on, Mr. Chair.
I'm whipping
He's not gonna second, but he's gonna.
counter motion, Zach?
Yeah.
It's not a
That's
counter
okay.
motion,
Alright,
I wanna make a motion after we just have the numbers, that's all,
okay.
if that's possible.
So get the answer from Brian and then
And
revisit.
then maybe circle back.
Okay. My logic behind this, for those folks who are watching on TV, is that this is integral to the educational curriculum for the 6th grade. They build up to this. It's science-focused curriculum dealing with, what's the name of the location again?
Sergeant Center is
The Sergeant Center. And so, whereas the 8th grade trip was just a lot of fun and does have educational aspects to it, is more kind of fun end of year. This is core to the actual educational opportunity for the students in the 6th grade. So, I want to make sure that it is not painful for anyone.
Since we're voicing our feelings here, I we had a fundraiser that was raising $5,000 or $6,000 a year that involved the town, the fair every year, which was not money from our taxpayers, but it was money coming in from people around the state and wherever to fund the program, but it didn't happen this year. So we did lose $6,000 or so of funding from outside of our tax base.
Because it just didn't happen.
I can't speak to that, I don't know. But it happened last year, didn't happen this year. So I don't.
Anyway, it's just a moot point at this point. Warrant articles.
What about NBC? Sure.
Oh, well, MBC.
Stick a fork in it, the budget's done.
Really, we're done.
We're done. Moved last night, approved, and we're on the warrant articles. With the
What
NBC.
changes did they make?
They left it as presented. Or accepted it as presented.
So, no further discussion necessary.
We gotta do your warrant articles.
All warrant articles. What do we got?
The first warrant article is simply the budget, so this vote would just be to put the number on the warrant article. It's the number that's voted on, plus the default is there as well.
Mr. Langlois, would you like to?
Yeah, so I would move Article 1 for the operating budget for the Deerfield Community School in the amount of $14,394,363 with a default budget of $14,162,505.
Second. I'll second that. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? 5-0.
Warrant article number 2 is the Para-Educator Association contract that you had already previously ratified, and those 4 numbers for the 4 years are on the warrant article, followed by authorization to have a special meeting if the contract fails, which is standard language that has been approved and accepted by the board in the past.
Mr. Oxnard?
I would like to move number 2. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yes.
Second.
Any discussion on number 2?
This is just number 2 or number 2 and number 3?
Just number 2. All in favor of number 2?
Aye.
Aye.
Number 3 is shall the Deerfield School District, if Article 2 is defeated, authorize the governing body to call a special meeting at its option to address Article 2 costs item.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And then we jump from 2 to 6. 3 to 6.
Yep.
All right, so number 4, which shall be hereafter known as number 4. Shall the school district vote to establish Deerfield Community School Addition Capital Reserve Fund under the provisions of RSA 35:1 for the purpose of studying, designing, planning, and partially funding the construction and furnishing of an addition to the Deerfield Community School, and to raise and appropriate the sum of blank to be placed in this fund. This sum to come from the June 30th, 2020 fund balance available for transfer on July 1st, 2020. Further, to name the school board as agents to expend from said fund. Recommendations required.
That can be taken off as can majority vote required. That was supposed to come off.
Okay.
That was just Dean's information to us that what would be required to establish it.
So what is the amount we would be interested in writing into this?
2/3. Okay. Do we have to put the 2/3
We have to-
language?
I don't think you have to put that language. I'll check.
How much do we want to fund this at?
I think we're gonna need about $9 million.
Thinking
Really
you're not
ratchet
gonna have that at the end of the
budget,
year?
that'd be great.
So,
Big round.
Do we have a feel for what the engineering, not study, but what the plans are gonna, what that next step in our process is gonna cost, roughly?
I had spoken to an architectural firm that works with North Branch Construction, and he did send some documents over that I had Kathy put in the drive. There were no cost items attached, and I didn't follow up with him. I think it's really difficult, depending on what your project is, to try to estimate something, and at this point, knowing that you were probably gonna put a larger sum of money in anyway, we didn't go out and get any bids. Nor do I think we necessarily have enough information that they would be able to give us a price at this point.
How much did we spend on the engineering study? 35, 40? I think it was either 35 or 40.
That sounds right.
What was it, Seth?
Well, I think to partially answer Nate's question, architecturals, it can be a bunch of different things. So architecturals could be $500,000 for full detailed drawings and mechanical drawings and electrical prints and plans and everything else. But we're not there yet.
First phase design,
Mm.
50 or 70.
Initial phase design could be 50, 70, maybe 100, depending upon how deep you want to get, and that dictates the process for how you want to do the project, if it's design building, whatever it may be. So I think, this is a good way for us to gauge the interest of the community and how they want to proceed with this. And so my mindset is you don't want the sum to be so large that it's gonna fail, but you don't want it to be an inconsequential amount of money, so that if you put $1 in there, sure, it's gonna pass, or $100, sure, it's gonna pass, you created the fund. And I've been kind of grappling with that number as to how do you
Balance.
how do you do a balance where you get an honest reaction, I think, from the community. And when we initially did the engineering, when we opened the improvement fund for this facilities repair, it was 75 and 75, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
And so both of those passed. And so that was $150,000, but we had $75,000 basically from surplus. But it was $150,000 commitment from the community into the investment back into the facility here. I'm inclined to think that that number might be a good starting point for us to say.
75.
I was thinking 150.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
And it's a starting point. And it most certainly doesn't, it's not gonna get you real deep, but it does give us the ability, if it passes, we have a reaffirmation that we are proceeding in the direction that the community wants. And that's been my biggest fear with a construction project, is finding out, the community's not there with you. But I think it also gives us enough capital to start the ball rolling within the next budget cycle, or within the next year, to say, okay, we now have a reaffirmation from the community, they want us to proceed, and then we have enough money for us to be able to go and start soliciting drawings and engineering and whatnot, and we can do it on our timetable. So I guess I would propose 150.
Before we get into actual proposals, should the argument be made that at 150, I think we could get the initial architectural drawings done, and we could get well down the path. Do you want to ask a hard enough question that you really gauge the community? I know you were grappling with the number, but at 150, are you really going to get a sense from the community of if they're going to play in millions, or are you going to get a sense of, well, you can have some plans? Do you want to ask that question at this point or not?
Well, there's two ways to look at that, I think. First of all, I do want to point out that this is we have the disclaimer, no amount to be raised from taxation.
Right.
So, but
From additional taxation.
But first of all, the language of the warrant is we're finally deciding to fish instead of cut bait on this. This is our affirmation that yes, we're ready to go forward and we're serious about doing this now. But the amount can also be that same affirmation if we ask for a larger amount, the 150 amount then again, I think that sends the signal to the community that we are serious about it. We know there's gonna be some serious money that has to be spent to start doing this rather than dubbing around like we've been doing. I wasn't gonna go that high to 150. I was more comfortable with 75 to 100, although your justification for 150 is good. You know, I wouldn't vote against 150. Again, thinking about it is making it a statement that we are serious about going forward with this project. So that's the way I'm looking at it.
I wonder too if it's worth adding, I don't know if you do these with the fund or not, but some sort of an expiration date. Like, we're starting this, we're serious about it, we should be moving on this in the next 4 or 5 years. And if we don't use this in, let's say, 10 years, then you can have the money back. Or, I don't know, what, 8 years or something like that.
It's like a lapsing fund.
I think that would require legal review to do something like that. When are the watch
I've never heard that done. I don't, doesn't mean it can't be done, but I don't.
What do they do in January?
January, well, the MBC is intending to act on them on January 7th for the public hearing, which is January 9th.
Which means we have one meeting? No meeting, because Wednesday is the first, and we're not having a meeting.
Do you have the week after the come
We have one.
But you said the
Oh,
seventh.
right, that means
Nine.
7,
Oh,
right,
it's a
right.
rough week.
Yeah.
For me.
If you need the meeting, you may not need your January meeting if you get it.
So I hear you, but I wouldn't want to do something like that without legal review, because creating that kind of a system if you do it wrong.
Well, yeah, although I agree with the theory behind yours, my thought, I guess my counterpoint to that would be is, if this passes and we establish this fund, you know, you may next year seek to put $350,000, a larger sum of money. And it may just become something where rather than, maybe that the community's approach is, let's get 30% of the money set aside before we go out and bond it, whatever it may be.
Could we add language in here that gave some sort of description, like initial professional planning is scheduled to begin next year, just like a sentence that lets people know this is starting next year, rather than getting into like we have to hit 30% before we do it, or we have to claw back money, or like just like I'm fine with either one, but
I think
well, that one scares me a little bit. But
I think this language and an accurate proper defense during deliberative should do it.
one other
This
thing,
has been vetted by legal as well.
We can always dissolve the fund, right? So if it doesn't occur within the.
I meant now is kind of a sign that we're in this and we're not looking for a carte blanche that we're just going to hold
Right.
on to forever.
Right.
You know, this is some money you're giving us, and we will use it in the next 5 years, or we won't. And if we decide not to do it, then we'll give you the money back.
Right.
Something like that.
Right, and I agree. I agree with the concept of it, and I also understand their arguments. I just wanted to point out that if for whatever reason this doesn't move, or we don't decide to go forward with that project, we can dissolve the fund and have the same result of what you're saying, giving it back, without that having to have that in there. So
I would be, and I'm always concerned if it's not contractual, tying the future board's decision making to something that isn't a contractual obligation.
so yeah, we can say in 5 years we can give it back, but who knows who's going to move forward in 5 years.
Right.
Well, what other idea? What about if you're looking for an authentic feel from the community about the $1 million question in the future somewhere? What if we change it to not come from the surplus, but actually be raised from taxation, but cut it down to something like $75,000 from taxation, rather than just kind of, you know, to a lot of people that's just easy, just kind of slide over money that they don't see. And that might be an easier vote than to say, I would raise my taxes right now for $75,000 to begin this process. That might be more
Yeah,
authentic.
but you run the risk of not having too small of a balance in the fund to get substantial work
So
done. To your point earlier.
I don't necessarily disagree with the logic in that. I
Yeah,
think
neither
the number has to carry enough weight to
really impact people.
yeah.
And I hear you were coming in a little bit lower, you're coming in 150, honestly, my gut was 250.
Well, I started there.
Just simply to be like, look, this is a huge decision. This is 1/4 of 1/10 of the possible costs of this project.
But people wouldn't get past that amount to see the disclaimer at the end of the paragraph that says no amount raised from
Well,
taxation.
that's the other thing I want to do is I want to eliminate no amount to be raised from taxation, and I know it's been brought up in our deliberative sessions a number of times, and just change it to funds will come from current year surplus. Or some sort of a language that says this is tax money. I don't want to use the no amount to be raised from taxation.
So because for me, this very much for me is a verification from the community, and it's something that I hope is positive from the community. The 250,000 number, I'm not afraid of, but if I was to do that, I would want to do it as a rather than drawing it from fund balance. I would want to do that to be raised, and then that gives you, that's a hard stop question, right? And I'd be okay with going about it that way. Doing 250 from the fund balance, we don't know that we're going to have a $250,000 fund balance. We assume we're going to have a fund balance. We don't know that we will. But if that passes and it's raised from taxation, okay, well then you know it's done. So I mean, I would be willing to go that route, but I'd want it to be a heavy enough question if we're going to go from taxation.
Can you put in the language of the warrant article itself to raise and appropriate the sum of up to $250,000 to come from current year surplus?
It would be up to.
It's legally defaults that if you have 100,000, you fund at 100,000. If you have 250, you fund full 250. If you have 260, you fund 250.
Okay.
So
So you can't put like a capping statement in there.
The capping is the dollar amount.
Well, it's either or, right?
well,
What you're saying is
it's
it's either
it
or.
will be funded if there is surplus. It would be funded out of the surplus of the amount that the surplus was up to
Right.
250.
And-
Okay,
and
so
that is-
that default language is in there.
If you have
I was just trying to
multiple
clarify.
articles, the first article that appears on the ballot
Gets
gets
funded
funded first.
Priority one,
And
right?
then if you run out of money halfway down the list, well, so be it. That's why we in past years have prioritized what articles go where.
But I think if you put that language you were talking about to come from current available surplus from current year budget in the article itself, right after that dollar amount, I think it delivered that.
I also hear Zach and Ed Nate's point of saying this is straight up going to raise your taxes.
Well, wait till the building goes up.
A bond will cost this town money. We have run surpluses in excess of $250,000 for years. So we could, if we do go down the path of funding it out of the surplus, we clearly, I would be an advocate of taking out the no amount to be raised from taxation and saying, making it clear this is coming from your current the current budget year, but it's coming from taxes. There's no
magic
current,
money
no
goal.
future amount for this particular warrant, or to do it where you just straight up raise it.
Is there a motion on the table at the moment?
There's nothing.
If
We've
we,
read it.
if we do go with the tax, or whatever the language is, and then it's voted down,
What do you do?
what does that mean?
It means that there is not an appetite in this town to even get the architectural drawings done.
So we hold off for a year.
Yeah, you can't do it for a year.
We move on to other focuses for a year. Now, that being said, so, because without a motion, we can't do much, so I'd move the question, but I would be for the amount of $250,000 to be raised from taxation.
I'll second it.
See if anybody wants to add anything.
So we are now discussing Article 4 with the amount of $250,000 to be raised from taxation, not from surplus. Discussion.
So I think we discussed it prior to the motion.
We're working on one.
But I also figured we need to get something on the table to work with, so.
You are asking a hard question right up front. This increases the chances that people are going to say no. And it also takes away from the opportunity of creating something. If you set out I think if you said it's coming out of the current budget year's surplus, I think you have obviously a higher chance of the warrant article passing. I don't know this for a fact. I don't think that there's a huge difference. I think that the town actually does support this. If you go that route, you wind up with something tangible to show the town to sell them. If you go with the straight taxation question, you are asking them a very hard question without ever showing them what could be. You're not taking the easier path of getting approval to get the plans to show the people what we're talking about and why we're talking about it.
I think that's my worry, and I don't know what like before I sat on the board, I don't really know what the compelling story is. I know there was a lot of building work done, so maybe there is a story, and I am out of the loop on what that compelling story is to say why we need this building. So I'm concerned that without building the capacity for the will, to get people behind it, putting it as a straight taxation without, like, kind of what you said, Jim, I agree with that. If there's nothing tangible to kind of like, hey, here's something that we'd like to get you really excited about, I'm worried that the average person, since we don't have sometimes we go to the polls and we're not as educated as we should be on these votes. And so without having something up front to talk about, like how the ways in which all the beneficial ways this building project will assist and help the community as well as the students and the curriculum, I'm worried that it might get voted down.
So,
I agree with your assessment. It's a hard
I'm
question.
just playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, no, I get it.
it's free to be amended, so I mean, it can be.
But we haven't had we could amend it before, but yeah.
So, I think you're right in that it's going to raise the risk of it getting voted down. Because I agree with what you just said too about people just kind of not knowing having the full context behind it. And I'm worried that if we go that route with the sticker shock behind it, that kicks the can another year down the road.
At least another.
At least another year.
And it may, if it gets defeated, it may destroy the political will of this board to move forward at any time in the future.
Right. So it could be self-destructive if we go that route. I get the idea behind wanting to get some form of some sense of the appetite for this kind of project, because it's going to be a big ticket project.
Yep.
Biggest ticket project we'll see in
Be
A
the
long
biggest one this
time.
town has ever seen, in all fairness.
Yep.
And the construction of this school back when it was done was
Yep. But
a
if
much
it's
smaller amount.
if it's not presented correctly, you will poison any future possibilities going forward. I really think we should stick with raising it or expressing it that it's going to come from surplus that it's tax money that's already been paid, that's already been levied. There's not going to be a future impact for this particular warrant article.
So make a motion.
To amend. You've been doing this for a
So-
while, this is how it works.
Yeah, I know. What's the original motion?
It's
You just amend the
two
motion.
fifties to be raised from taxation.
You could amend the motion to be raised from existing fund balance.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a motion to amend the original motion to, instead of coming from taxation, raised from taxation or appropriated from taxation,
It would
whatever.
be-
For 2021.
It would be the original language, so you're gonna amend it to read
The original.
as it was drafted.
To be,
What Patty said.
All right, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we are now discussing the amendment to the motion to change the funding source from taxation raised for the 2021 school year to surplus from the
Budget for the 1920 school year.
Does this change that changes the date at which we can access it, right?
It would be available July 1st.
Regardless, it would be available July 1st.
Our
Right.
budget starts and our surplus, our budget ends.
Yep.
So it'd be raised and appropriated it would be appropriated July 1st if it's,
Beginning of the year.
no, either way. So if it would be coming from the current year's fund balance, so we would have it on June 30th, it ends July 1st, that money would get moved over. Or if it's
it
raised
comes
and
from the next
appropriated,
year's,
it gets raised and appropriated on July 1st,
which is the beginning of the next year.
which is still 2021.
So
July
6
1st
months.
of 2020, funding comes in either way.
Regardless of
2020.
access to the
6
money in
months.
6 months.
Okay.
All right, and so then my other point was that I fully agree with Gigi in that this having people going into the voting booth in an informed kind of way is the most important part here. And I don't know that the deliberative session is enough to get the word out to educate people. So I would think that part of this, if it's going to be the taxation question, would require, and either way, it requires, I think, work from us to get the word out and talk about it. And so part of I think it would be easier and would require less work if it was not from taxation directly, but more work if it is from taxation to make sure we have an authentic, legitimate voice from the community. So I guess the question is, do we have enough bandwidth among us to get that work and get the word out there by the vote in mid-March,
So
to make it from purely taxation?
I think my logic, it's a hard question. It's going to be a hard answer, and it is going to require a investment from everybody in this town. I don't know.
But if we do it from the surplus this year, I think it
More
makes it
apt
a
to
little bit
pass.
easier, a little bit more appealable, a little easier, more likely to pass, I think. I don't know what the number is, but I think it is more likely to pass. And then that might ideally buy us some time to use that money to do some of the publicizing and like Jim, you were saying, to draw up some sort of sort of ease into it rather than if we drop the ball in the next 3 months, then we've kind of failed and so all right. I agree with you on that, but I think I'm going to switch that.
Any other discussion on the amendment to the original motion? All in favor?
Alright.
Opposed?
At least we're making progress here. So now the question is the dollar amount, which is $250 is currently what's on.
$250 coming from budget surplus.
Does when we said your motion, your amendment said to go back to the original wording.
Right,
Does
so
that
the
mean
original
that-
language is exactly as you're reading.
So then my new amendment is to remove no amount to be raised from taxation.
Do you want to add anything in that space?
Yes, let's change it.
Or do you want to kill the dollar amount first and then polish it out?
Okay, sure.
We can vote on we can tweak the language and edit
Polish it
outside of the
after
vote.
we get the dollar amount. Okay.
All right, so we're back on the original question, $250,000 coming from the surplus that
Fund balance.
Fund balance from 1920 budget. Any additional discussions? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
All right, it is passed. Any additional changes?
Yeah, the wording.
Okay, what would you move?
I think what you're trying to do, Nate, is to strike recommendations required, majority vote required, and the no amount to be raised from taxation lines.
To be replaced by,
I was gonna strike them first and then we can figure out how you.
but you can strike and replace it.
To be replaced by, funds, what have we used in the past then?
I was gonna say, I think, didn't it say no new
No amount to
funds
be raised,
raised?
no amount to be raised from, go to the Bible.
Yeah, that's, I think
Or
you've done it in the past that
what
way.
about something like funds to come from prior taxes?
Or funds to come from
We
20,
had-
from
last year-
1920 fund balance.
I think Jim's on the right path, because we ran the change of
Yeah.
language past legal last year. And it was a specific flavor.
Yeah, I think you should use what we've had in the past, so we don't have to get into
Yeah.
legal
I
opinion,
think
if it meets your needs.
is
Oh, I thought it was already in here.
previous. Page 61 maybe?
No,
Maybe they didn't get put in yet. Here they are.
So there we go, we found something we can add for next year. Just
They're
previous.
on the table of contents. They were when I looked at it. So I'm
Yeah, it
not sure
says
what
one, it
happened.
says page 61, but I don't have the,
Right.
I feel the like it. So I would amend it to read whatever we have used last year that was cleared by legal. Whatever that language is. Which is a very
I gotta see it before I agree to that.
nondescript.
are they on the drive anywhere?
Do you want to deal with striking of the existing language? You know that's going one way or another. So I'll make the motion.
Eddie, didn't you say those recommended required and majority vote required were already struck?
I suggested it, but
We
we
need
should
to-
Suggested.
take action
We
on
need
it.
to strike it. So, all right, just for housekeeping, I'll move to strike.
Well, do we need to wait for the chairman?
No, I can move. Chairman stepped out, right? We can still make motions.
Well, I think I'll just remind you that you asked me to, if we needed to add the 2/3 vote. I mean, I think without you voting, if you give me the gist of what you're asking for, I can have Dean word it correctly. So if your intention is to find out whether or not we need to put the 2/3 on there, I'll find that out and put it on if we do.
Okay.
And then if you want me to have him reword the no amount to from taxation to what he approved in the past, I can do that as well.
So I would be comfortable with that.
Sorry, guys. Do you have any recollection of the wording? We can't,
What's that?
we can't find the wording from last year, we changed it.
I feel like it was something about no new taxation or some, it made it clear that there was tax money raised, but it wasn't new. I don't remember the exact wording. Did you go into the drive into last year's meetings?
I'm going to the website,
I'm just wondering if your budget information was in the drive.
Actually, you could probably just Google the school district
I tried it.
warrants.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to do too.
It's an informational line one way or the other, it's not a legally obligated line, so we could say anything.
Right.
We could say
Well-
funds to be raised from,
So when you stepped out, Patty had suggested that, giving her an understanding of what we would like, she can have Dean draft it appropriately.
basically, well, I mean, you guys,
I'm okay
you're
with
making
that.
the motion, or you got halfway through the motion. My thought was, we wanna make it clear that this is not free.
What
If that
is-
makes sense.
Mr. Robertson,
I understand, yeah.
Okay.
What's
You've
that?
already paid
What did
taxes
you
this
find?
Yes.
money, so.
And I just want to clarify this,
Yeah.
just commission tax money, it's not gonna impact.
Right.
It's already been paid for.
It said, last year's it says no amount to be raised from taxation.
Well, at least we're consistent.
So you didn't change it. There were discussions, people asked for it to be changed, I remember that. And I think we changed it in November.
All right,
So is the board okay with having
Dean draft language, or
based upon,
are we,
I don't want it to be kind of hidden. I want it to be clear that this is coming from the surplus or previously raised funds.
well,
There's
why
no-
don't you suggest language and then run it by Dean, and if it isn't appropriate, we can tweak it and.
so we do not.
So something to the effect like the warrant articles will not impact the current tax rate?
No, they will though, because it impacts how much, if this doesn't get voted, then that surplus goes back to the voters.
Right,
So it does impact, to reduce the tax, so it does impact the tax.
I just wanna,
will not increase
if we don't
the
button
current
this up
tax rate.
tonight,
Yeah.
we realistically will need to meet ahead of the NBC meeting on the 7th, because we really do wanna have a recommendation on here prior to a vote at the NBC. And our next meeting is scheduled for the 8th.
So funds to be raised from current
Years.
I liked your wording that you just spouted out. I barely holding on to it, but it was something to the effect of previously raised funds.
Funds to be drawn from previous year's budget, or previous year's.
It's something along those lines, but I think
It's this year's budget.
Right.
And it's surplus.
From previously raised taxes, or previously collected funds, previously.
previously collected, previously appropriated.
Kristen, if you're already online, would you mind going to the Pembroke School Board site and see if you can find the warrant articles from last year?
So, hey.
Yeah.
The language I just tried to write, which is, I was just trying to kind of guess what you're saying, but that is already written in there. I mean, it says, this sum to come from the June 30th, 2020 fund balance. Right, I mean, but, and that's the canned language, it's in every, whether it's the towns or the schools. I mean, it says it. You know, I agree with no amount to be raised from taxation, I would just remove that line, I would remove the other two lines, and I'd just
All good.
let it fly. So I'm gonna, because again, motions are required, I'm gonna move to strike recommendations required, majority vote required, and no amount to be raised from taxation. On the existing resolution.
Second.
I think maybe.
No.
Sorry.
any discussion on striking those three sentences?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any additional changes to the warrant articles? Kristen, what does it say at the end? Is there any language?
I put in a draft, is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, Joe, so.
This article does not include appropriations voted in other warrant articles.
No.
Said funds to come from blah, 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 previously established. Unassigned fund balance available for transfer, funded from, with such amounts to be funded from the 2019 unassigned fund balance available for transfer.
So it's basically.
Basically the same.
But is there a line at the end of that warrant article about taxation?
No. Unassigned, I'll say that. bidding process. No, so they just
They
stopped
just
it.
removed it.
Yeah.
I knew they had taken action. Okay, so
So for financial warrant articles, that is what we need to do.
I had another order.
There are, right, I'm seeing it for financial. They use the word cost is in both of them, and there's a dollar figure in the second one, however, neither one is asking for funding.
What are you looking
The Nate's suggested articles around.
Oh, I'm
it's
sorry.
in your packet, you proposed that.
No,
So
I'm sorry.
am I correct in saying that these are not financial? And we can talk about them tonight, but they don't need to be voted on by the NBC?
Correct.
Yes, but so the second question is, and the answer to that question, I believe, is in the binders, when are warrant articles due?
We have to post them before the
All warrants?
deliberative, yes.
Okay.
So these do not have to be done tonight, but we can start talking about them. So they're yours, would you like to speak to them?
Yes, please. So, back to our last meeting, we went around this, and I've been talking, right, I brought this up a year or two ago as well. And my goal, and I am not locked into this wording, but my goal is to get a feel for the opinion of the town in terms of if there is some sort of a increase to the cost of educating our high school age students associated with sending fewer students to Concord and more students to wherever they want to go. Then is there willingness on the part of the taxpayers or the voters to do that, to cover that increasing cost? And theoretically, I know that it is our job as a school board, if we choose to increase the cost of sending our high school students by making whatever decisions we make, we could also cut funding somewhere else so that in the end the taxpayers don't see any change in the tax rate. But that's hard to stomach from my perspective, one to also run a good program at DCS. So I see the possibility of having a higher cost associated with sending fewer students to Concord and more students somewhere else. Zach, your point is that that's not a certainty, and I think forgive me for speaking for you, but I think that's what you've said, and I get that that's not a certainty. But having talked with Concord, having talked with other, and looking around at other tuitions in the area, I feel there is a high probability that sending fewer than 90% of our students to Concord will result in a higher cost for educating our high school students. And so, I landed on this as an idea that if we have two different questions, one of them is asking the towns, the voters, if they want school choice. There may be some that are actually wanting the idea of a school of record and all of our students have a collective and a sort of a full student body at a school. And we would get that, I think, feeling from the voters with number one. Number two would throw in a number. I picked up an increase of $2,000 per year. I'm happy to change any of this stuff. But then we might get a different response if it costs more money from the voters. I'm not locking anything in here. I don't feel like this language says there is a cost necessarily. But if there's a cost, would the voters be willing to cover that? Is school choice that important to them? Or is, in the end, the cost more important to the taxpayers of this town? That's what I'm trying to do with these two questions.
I have one question
Yeah,
around,
hands over here.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna go first. There we go. The specific term student choice carries a lot of connotation in this space.
It does.
Is your intention to move away from school of record towards entire school choice with this question?
So this is not binding any, and I want the language to be completely unbinding. My question is yeah, it does carry a lot of political weight, and I would love to have a feel for what our voters think. number one, in a political sense and in a sort of an opinion, what, from their perspective, what are they looking at? I personally am not thinking about moving away from the school of record. This is not gonna move us necessarily in that direction without our vote, obviously. But I hear there are, from when we've engaged with the parents, younger parents seem to value school choice, if I'm speaking in broad terms here. There are younger parents who don't want to all go to Concord, but then older parents, by which I mean parents of older students and taxpayers who have previously gone through Concord, seem to have a much more positive spin on the idea of going to Concord and having one school of choice. So I'm trying to get more of a feel for the community, yes, politically, but the decision still comes down to us in the end.
But I can see where you're going with that because the language in the first one would imply, I think, and total freedom of choice. And that's not a bad thing. I just the way I read it, I can see your point of view. To get to talk about your point of cost, if we went to full freedom of choice, but try to retain Concord as the default school, I think that would increase. They're not going to give us the same prices if we lock in 90% of our student population. They're going to be, well, because of the additional, logistical issues with us, we're going to need extra funding for that. So I think, just to reinforce what you said earlier, I think if we bring in school choice or we adopt school choice in any form, there's going to be a cost in general. So I like the fact that you're trying to bracket it with this. And I would even say on Article 2, I would say that additional cost of, let's put it at $2,500, that's a round figure, but it doesn't, whatever. But I like the way that you've tried to bracket it. Say, try to find that tipping point of what is the community willing to pay up to for that freedom of choice.
So, thank you, because the two questions address my primary concern with, in the past, as you mentioned.
They don't mention homework.
Moving on. They address my primary concern with phrasing the question in a manner that solicits a specific answer. And to Ken's regard, $2,000 maybe is or isn't enough. I mean, we could very easily look at the average difference from the schools we currently have budgeted for and pick a number out there. I would potentially want to lessen the weight of the individual student choice and maybe add individual student choice or a second school of record. That would be my thought, is I think it's very important for us to still convey that the intent, at least mine would be, is that we always maintain a school of record. And I do not want it to be perceived with these questions that we are interested in abandoning that model, because I think a full student choice model does not provide an adequate opportunity for all of our students. So
I thought 2 schools of record was legally a legal
You can have
impossibility.
Barrington, is that it?
Well,
But then you have to retract.
they have, I think they all have a school of record with the option to go to other places. So
It maybe
could
could
you
be
consider
worded-
that a second
And maybe
school
it's
of record,
worded,
maybe,
or and maybe it's maintaining a school of record with
at least one other option or.
with other options or something along that. But that student choice statement, agreeably so, carries a very heavy weight, but it's a very specific term. And it very much feels like an advocacy for a voucher system, and I don't see that as being a possibility for Deerfield.
Yeah, and
So something in there just to, and how it gets worded, I mean, different, but just some additional phrasing in there to indicate that, you know, hey, school of record of
yeah, there is,
some.
I'm sure you've experienced in talking with people, there is a high sensitivity to not having that a school of record. We want, they want that
So what kind of language,
safety net.
what kind of language do you, we haven't even voted on whether or not we're gonna have anything like this on the ballot. So what kind of language, I'm considering this kind of a work session around this, unless you want to make a motion to add.
I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I think I appreciate the work session approach, however, I was looking at the binder of when the warrants have to be posted, and it leaves us very little time to get to the MDC and have the warrant posted by January 24th.
But does this have to be ABC?
I think we have to present them with all the warrant articles.
I thought
So
they
they're
only
finished. They
voted
don't vote on it.
on financial.
Right.
Okay, so that
So it means that we're dealing with this tonight.
The last day of a petition warrant is a little further down the road, but that does throw off their scheduled public hearing.
So I think the first question, Mr. Chair, would be is, does this board want to put questions such as these on the warrant, yes or no? And then that determines to the extent that we're going to spend discussing this.
sounds like a valid question. Sense of the board in regards to whether or not we want to continue this discussion, all in favor of continuing? Aye. Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain, okay. We're having the conversation.
So back to,
So well, let me just recap where we're at before we go any further. There's the initial discussion, there was the question around the language around school student choice. There was the counter discussion around signifying the retention of a school of record with an option to go somewhere else is kind of where I think we are at this point, is that correct?
yes, and I think I have an insertion that satisfies at least my quandary.
Read it
So
off.
if we take the language that Nate has and in between supports and.
And which one, Article 1 or 2?
Well, they're basically duplicates except for the cost question.
Okay.
So for me, it would be in between supports and an individual, it would be supports maintaining a school of record while also providing options for individual student choice.
Do you want to get away from the language of student choice? Do you want to say that in a different way to try to get away from the politicized?
I would love to if this group is interested in working through that. And I guess that motion would apply to both.
Second option, instead of choice.
So, the second option.
While offering the second option or while?
So maybe just from a cleanliness standpoint, let's insert one bit of language and then address maybe that second student choice thing. And so I guess my motion would be to insert that maintaining a school of.
We don't need to make a motion, we're just working.
Okay, we're just working, all right, so, and I would apply that to both 1 and 2. The same language in the same location.
So maintaining a school of record while offering a second option?
While also providing,
I
I have options for, but then if you change individual student choice to something else, that doesn't necessarily really take English.
Do we want to say alternative, or does that bring in other connotations as well?
So to see if the town of Deerfield supports maintaining a school of record while also offering a second option for secondary school assignment if there is no additional cost to taxpayers.
The second option is vague enough.
Are you going to do just one option or others?
Second could
So
be,
that's the question.
It could be additional options.
Additional options.
Additional
options
Offering additional options?
for secondary schools. You want to read?
Options. Yeah, I'll read it through again. to see if the town of Deerfield supports maintaining a school of record while also offering additional options for secondary school assignments,
If there is no additional cost,
or
Yeah.
whatever the heck that's.
and reading the same language below.
Yeah.
I'm more comfortable with that than I am
Yeah.
initially with the language as was presented. I give Jim all the credit, he's nothing.
Alright. Okay, so we are now at the point of kind of, so we kind of, I'm waiting for your input on this.
As am I.
We kind of have this first sentence worked out, it feels like.
But I feel like there's wisdom coming for us.
I don't have any wisdom, believe me. I think that, and I like the idea of wanting to know what the voters think. I'm not a fan of using warrant articles to get a sense of the community. And I know that people do it in the past, but if we're really, in being serious, like whether we're serious about a building or whether we're serious about talking about our high school options, I feel like we probably need a more in-depth plan. Because I just imagine, all of the people that don't have any children in the school and they're like thinking about school of record, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? Like so I think you'll get some idea, but I don't know if you will get the most informed idea from that. So that's all I'm thinking. I'm not opposed to putting it on, but I don't know that we'll get what we need from it.
I think that there is a lot of truth, and I have entirely forgotten. I've been sitting here for too long to realize that school of record is not a standard. People don't know outside of the education world.
Right.
What the hell that
That isn't a term everybody uses.
Right. Or what benefits
Right.
it
What that-
brings
what that
and
means.
what it means not to have a school of record.
So does it mean, since we're discussing this, would it mean a much more extensive explanation beyond just a sentence or two where it breaks down I think Nate's initial, and I don't want to speak for you, but I think that the impetus was to provide an opportunity for the largest gathering of Deerfield residents to have input on whether or not this question that seems to come up every year and a half should be different. And as we're coming towards the end of the Concord contract, a different tack should take. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So the board wanted to have the discussion. Do you guys want to add additional language? I entirely agree that things like school of record are flat out going to confuse more than half of the voter population.
Like, does it mean, if you still wanted the mailing to go on, does it mean that, the warrant to go on, does it mean that we need to do a mailing with the intent behind the question? Because the board is grappling with really trying to understand, do people want to pay more money?
Maybe it's worth, maybe it's worth doing a mailing for this question and the one we were just talking about with the high school. They're two major things that theoretically, that we have to wrestle with. And maybe a mailing is a great way to do that. Could we provide enough information in a mailing that people would read that could get legitimate information?
Yeah. And again,
So just to digress a little, which is what we're fantastic at.
Nobody's better.
If you were going to make this more into a narrative, it would be something along the line as the Deerfield School District comes towards the end of our contract with Concord High School. We're interested in the sense of the community in regards to best path forward. And then get into the question, and it will wind up being a full paragraph long.
Can we insert a paragraph?
We can write a Bible and,
But again,
you can't call it a Bible.
sorry.
Yeah,
but
that's tough.
again, with Gigi's point of, is this the right venue to be asking those questions? Or do we do a separate mailing individual and try to gather?
No, but I think the mailing is to inform them as much as possible this is the way that we get 1,500 people to give us their, which is almost half of the voters in the town might show up this day. That's a great, maybe a third.
And I think, and Gigi, I think, so we've continuously tried to find ways to get feedback from the community, and we don't, right? And so we're sitting here in our bubble, to a certain extent, trying to get a sense of, what the community wants us, what direction they want us to go in, and getting feedback necessarily. I mean, that's our audience, that's the feedback we're getting from the community. And so I think for us, it's every avenue, at least for me, it's every avenue that we can get it. And it's very easy for us to get feedback from the parents of our 500 students. We have a way to solicit feedback from them, and they'll typically give it to us. But there's other parties that have a vested interest because it affects them financially, personally, whatever drives their decision making. And so there's many different ways as we can try to get something back. I mean, if it's a resounding no, okay, well then you have your answer, and if it's a resounding yes, then you have your answer, but it's going to be something in between, and hopefully
51%,
Well-
you get no clarity.
Well, but what you will get between Article 1 and Article 2, or Question 1 and Question 2, I think is a better term, is you will see really how invested is that voting bloc willing to be. Are they at no cost? Sure, everything sounds great and wonderful, but let's put a dollar number to it. You want us to build a school? Great, here's a dollar number to start. And this is just to get a stack of papers on a desk so that we can go to contractors. So it at least, I think for me, it solicits some sort of response from hopefully 1,000, 800, 1,500, however many people show up to vote in March. Whether we find the data to be helpful or not is dependent upon the results that come back.
One other aspect that will happen, as soon as you put a question like this on the warrant article, people will, regardless of whether or not you say this is non-binding, people will expect you to react according to the way the vote goes.
Mm-hmm.
So,
It's part of why I wanted to water it down to the extent.
well, we are representatives of the community. If the community clearly speaks, it's an intent that, maybe that's the way the community wants to go. So I guess before we get too philosophical on it, do we want to, A, first have something like this, and then B, if we do want to have something like this on the warrant article, what are the thoughts around adding additional narrative to it? I mean, have you guys, I would not be comfortable with it with kind of education speak in it. I would want it to be clear why we're asking this question, what this question is about, and maybe what the ramifications of this question might be. Those would be the three things I want to hit.
I don't disagree with you, but I don't want to have that conversation without that instrument. Because
So you're saying don't do this then? That's what I'm hearing.
I'm saying, I'm not opposed to doing this, but because it's going on a warrant, I want clearance from the person that's going to be defending us if somebody disagrees with the results or how it's going to work.
I mean, the other option, I don't know if you've spoken to enough parents, somebody could do a petition warrant article and have 25 signatures, and it has to go on the warrant exactly as it's written. It doesn't matter whether it's you know, it's just not, if it's not going through you, then our legal doesn't have to give an opinion on what we're putting forward, because it's a petition warrant and those go on.
Questions we ask hold a lot of weight, so you wanna ask the right question.
That's right.
So, I have one board member who's cautious legally. We have one board member who wants to ask the question.
I am in agreement with asking the question the way we've rewritten it here, with the some sort of process to add context behind it, either be it a mailing or don't we send out ballot questions?
We can send information on.
A voter guide we did.
A voter guide, an
guide.
insert into a voter
But it
guide.
doesn't really have any digest or any background to it, it's just a question.
And anything that we send out has to be very clearly information.
Right.
We cannot ask any
Right.
kind of a leading
Well,
question.
no, I get that, but that's what the intent was of communicating. I don't,
So we have, so you,
I think if you put a paragraph on here, nobody's gonna read it.
okay. So you want to, you want to move forward with a shorter question.
Shorter question
With
with
a
additional information being pushed out.
There's, even though there's a solid likelihood that people are not going to read the mail.
That's,
Right.
if you put it on the warrant, they're not gonna read it on the warrant either. So,
Right.
it's a question of,
But you can't make that assumption for people. Look, for, okay.
either
Sorry.
way,
I think you need to,
We have two people who are interested, we have one person who's not. What do you want to do?
I'm not opposed to it going forward. I just said it's just not my favorite way of garnering that.
So if I had to say yes or no, Gene's just going to say that the warrant article, let's do it,
Yeah.
or no?
Yeah, no,
Yes. Okay.
I'd say, yeah, put
Three
it on.
people want to apply.
and so it's the editorial or it's the paragraph that concerns me more that I want legal opinion on.
Right. So for me, you have to provide all of the information to the people on the piece of legal paper that you're asking them the question. So I hear you with do a mailer and have a shorter question. But if that question doesn't include all of the information to get the factual answer that you want, you remove some of the point of it. So I would want on this to have a narrative that explains to people why you were asking this question. That would be my thought. I would want to say, as you know, like I said, like Deerfield Community School District or the Deerfield School District is coming towards the end of our contract with Concord High School in 2024. As we plan to move forward, we would want to get a sense of the community as to whether or not the community would want to stay dedicated entirely to Concord, or create a situation where the town of Deerfield supports maintaining Concord High School while offering additional options.
You're also providing, how do I want to say this? So at some point, we will be negotiating with somebody about a 5 or a 10 or a 20-year commitment. And
So by putting Concord High School in there,
prior to a negotiation, you are like,
tipping our hand,
yeah, you're throwing some cards on the
this is gonna throw gas on the fire anyway.
can we put that paragraph as like a header before
You
these
can do whatever you
questions?
like.
No, I mean, I'm just thinking about the format. If we have to put all that information in the question itself, nobody's gonna read it. But if you did it as a header before the two questions, saying, here's the explanation, do we, as we come to the end of the contract, blah, blah, blah.
I don't even think it's that wordy. I think like,
Right, but just to say, okay, with this in mind, we are asking the public's input on these two questions. And then list them out that way.
Sure.
Could we move this to later in the meeting? Are we gonna take a short break? Could I have five
Is there a
minutes?
pizza break?
What's that?
Did anybody order pizza tonight?
The chowder, the corn chowder from the.
I would also think that we could get Andrea out of here. She wants to go home for tonight. She's probably enjoying this conversation.
This is why I'm here.
Okay.
So typically we
300
we don't
meetings, we
do all
finally
the
get
reports
somewhere.
in the second meeting, but they got put on, so it's,
I
I
know.
wanna whiz through them.
So is this a circle back?
Are we okay tabling this final warrant article for, while Nate works on it for a little bit, and then go through our other things, and then we'll come back to it?
Sure.
Is there anything interesting at the PTO, or nothing?
I have nothing.
Okay. Concord High School they weren't able to make the last one, they will come to the next one, I would imagine. Staff report is not happening. The executive board report got canceled. The executive board got canceled. Do you have a report?
Of course. Well, I didn't until at 2:00 when I looked at the agenda. I was like, oh, I'm gonna get that together.
I honestly missed it. I didn't know. I don't know. So I have a report.
So I banged that out for you, you know, in between my bonbons. So
Okay,
this is
nice.
for December 5th through December 18th. The class of the week last week was Mrs. Wilson in first grade. I realized I probably should mention it because you might not know all those people. First grade, and Mr. Grieve is visiting with Mrs. Potter's class this week in fifth grade. The girls and boys had a game against Nottingham in basketball. Their Tuesday game yesterday was obviously postponed against Epsom, and their next game is this Thursday, and it's going to be in Pembroke. Both girls and the A-18 boys will be playing there because Thursday is the winter concert for grades 1 through 4 here. As some of you might have seen on our the screen when you came in, we've been enjoying a 10-day holiday countdown as a staff to Liz McGovern and Heidi Cook were the brains behind this one. We've done things like we've had a Teen Spirit Day where everyone dressed up in some sort of theme around the holiday theme. In sixth grade was Christmas trees. The office staff wore Santa's reindeer. We've had flashy Feliz Navidad, and it was flashy in this building. Mad About Plaid, where people wore flannels, and we had Grinch Day on Monday, where everyone wore green, and we had kindness canes for the staff to hand out, candy canes to hand out to a staff that they would like to thank. Today was Selfie with the Elfie Day, so we had little elves hidden all over the school, and the first person to grab a selfie with the Elfie and send it to Heidi or Liz got a prize. We've got some prizes together. And then we had a cookie exchange today as well. So that's been a lot of fun. The staff has really enjoyed that. We did have to cancel our Christmas party. It was on that treacherous 1-inch snowstorm that we had a couple Fridays ago. Remember that one?
Yeah.
Yep, it was marked safe. The treacherous one. But it was going to be at the Longview, and Heidi and Liz took off a few minutes early to get up there, and it took them forever to get up that hill, and so we decided at last minute that we had to cancel. So we put this in place, and it's been a lot of fun. Staff has really enjoyed it. Our fifth graders hosted our all-school meeting, and they did an awesome job. They knocked it out of the park last Tuesday, the 10th of December. On the 11th, we had our 5th through 8th grade winter concert with Ms. Tarling, our long-term substitute, and Mr. Trong. Did a wonderful job with our 5th through 8th grade. Report cards were published last Friday, the 13th. I've only gotten one. We usually put a little, thing out. If you don't get this, please let us know. And sometimes you get 4 or 5 or 6 people responding saying nothing came through, and I only got one. I haven't checked in with Brooke or Candy because our both are. Yep. Okay. So I think that's getting a little bit better. Our social activism magnet had a middle school dance last Friday. Our student council has done a hat day fundraiser for their New York City trip. They did one last Friday, and they're doing one this Friday as well. It's $1 to wear your hat. You get marked on your hand, and you can wear your hat for the day. Cheerleading has started back up at DCS. They've had a couple of practices. And our 8th graders are visiting Concord High School tomorrow to get their personal tour from 8:45 to 11:45. So it'll be a big day for our 8th graders. We also have our winter concert for grades 1 through 4 tomorrow night. 6 o'clock will be our 1st and 2nd graders, and 6:45 is call time for our 3rd and 4th graders and our 4th grade band and chorus. Happy holidays to all. Enjoy your holiday break. We will be on holiday break from Monday, the 23rd of December through the Wednesday, the 1st of January, to come back to school on Thursday, January 2nd, 2020.
One quick question, follow-up on the gym floor vote last time.
Yep.
I know Amber had gotten back and said that
They're able to.
they're able to do it.
Yeah.
Are we moving that process through the selectmen so that we get funding dedicated before the end of this year? And it doesn't go back from the capital improvement plan?
Is that a question?
It is a question, like has somebody reached out to the town offices?
I don't think so.
Okay. We absolutely, I don't know how many more,
Whose job is it?
That would be a Amber.
Do you want Amber to reach out to them?
yeah, and we may already be too late.
They're still open.
The selectmen?
The town office is still open.
It has to
The
be,
selectmen out there need.
they have to meet and dedicate the funds out of the impact funds before December 31st, or it goes back, which we talked about when we passed the winter.
Which is why.
I don't know that.
She should be able to give Pete a call tomorrow and find out if.
But if there isn't another selectmen's meeting or SOL.
We would have to maybe ask the selectmen if he could do it. They can call a meeting if they want to help us with that. Maybe if Amber gets an answer and can relay to Jill.
Yeah, I don't know that was clear that Amber was supposed to do that. I will talk to her.
And then we have to decide, I believe they were, the company that we're going through was able to work through this in the spring, late spring, so do we start April vacation and work through May? Do we start in June and hold graduation outside? That's the next decision.
Shake up graduation a little bit.
I mean, you could, if you started in June and held graduation outside, I mean, you could rent a large tent. So you had some,
Would have the least impact, and it would shake it up a little bit, and make it something a little different, for our sweet little class of 40.
Whatever,
the administration would
up to you.
Okay.
recommend and
Be creative.
You got it.
Any other questions for the principal?
I do have, I got a little bit of information. I think I probably need to dig a little more. I looked back in this is for the science camp. Do you want me to talk about this now, or do you want to bring it back up again?
If you have the numbers.
Well, I
we'll
don't,
talk about the next meeting.
okay, yeah, because I
It's
have.
not until March or April, right?
Right, and I know they've done some fundraising, they've also given a deposit, and the only amount I could find last year, they paid $421
So that was last year at Sergeant.
to Sergeant,
So we want to
exactly.
be seeing what was prior to Sergeant.
Right, and
Okay.
Ferry Beach.
Brian thinks that Ferry Beach with fundraising was about $250 to $270 for students, but that included fundraising. So anyway, let me dig and get
Okay.
some updated numbers for you, and then we can talk about it
Okay.
in January.
All right. Any additional discussion for the principal?
CRB, sir. Oh, sorry.
Do you have anything with CLB or no?
No, sir.
Would you like to go back to the warrant articles? You ready?
I think so.
All right, why don't we circle back to the warrant article? And did you type something up?
I did.
What you got?
All right, I like Ken's idea of having I think this is your idea, I don't know where this came from, an introductory sort of paragraph, and then having the two simple questions below it. So it's not, as you said, it's not a big paragraph, it's just 3 lines. It says, Deerfield's contract with Concord High School is approaching its end. As we plan for providing high school education to our students in the future, we would like to know the voters' opinions regarding high school options. The board intends to maintain a school of record or a default high school going forward. Does that make it clear?
Only if your hands appear in the language.
It's got quotes in it.
airport.
That was my hope to try to clarify.
How about also known as?
Also known as a
Like this equals this,
Designated?
designated,
Yeah, I was gonna
designated,
say, yeah,
dedicated, also known as a dedicated high school.
designated.
Designated.
So is that a motion?
He's
No,
reading
no, I'm
through.
still in the middle of work, also known as designated.
I wanna get a motion on the table so we can progress.
Well, can you just hear this first and then we can.
If you make it as a motion, we can progress from there.
And then the two questions are basically the same. Question one, to see if the town of Deerfield supports providing additional high school options to students if there is no additional cost to the taxpayers. And two, to see if the town of Deerfield supports providing additional high school options to students if there would be an additional cost of $2,500 per student per year.
I think 2,500 is low.
I'd go to 3,500 or
3,500, 4,000? I mean,
Well, what's the gap between us and Co Brown?
That's what I was
Brown
gonna
is
say,
the-
or
is
say
the-
up
Some
to,
of
maybe you could
favorite.
say up
It's
to
four, it's.
that much per
Around
pupil.
7,300, 17,300.
17 something.
Yeah, I
And
think
we
it's
are
at
at
least three
13,200
something.
with-
Well, you gotta add in the,
Capital fee.
That's
Capital
the
fee.
capital fee, I think.
I thought the capital fee put it
No,
all
it's
over
with the
14.
Nope. 12,900 plus,
Plus 400, or 500 for the capital fee.
6.
13,400.
all right, Co-Brown would be 12,925 plus the capital fee of 508, puts you at 13,500 effectively.
That's a contract.
Concord, I'm sorry. And then Co-Brown is 17,200, so it's about a $4,000.
that's 4,000. So I'll just leave it at 4,000.
So
I agree with Gigi's up to 4,000.
Up to, because if you're
Well,
not
it's not-
choosing Co-Brown, you
Yeah.
might be choosing Raymond, which might look,
Raymond could be
Like
less money,
a
and that was the argument I had in the
that's
past, is there's.
why I'm saying up
Yeah,
to.
PA, if they chose PA, that's
So
I
I would,
Less
I
than
would support
Concord
that,
Also specify what year our contract
Mhm.
ends at Concord.
and I would,
Because if we say we're coming to the end, everybody's gonna be like, oh, next year. Woo!
that means your fourth grader may not go to Concord.
Is ending in
2024.
24, I think.
2024. Alright, so motion or motion?
Yeah,
Well, do you wanna read?
can I,
Read through it one more
well,
time.
you can motion as you reads. My only commentary.
Hold on. Let him finish, let him make the motion, and then you can start. Go ahead, please finish.
I finished it with, so,
Okay, so would you like to make that as a motion?
sure, because.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, now you make that.
I would just want, approval of the language from Dean prior to placing on the ballot.
Can you read it one more time?
Yeah, read it all the way through with the,
Deerfield's contract with Concord High School is ending in 2024. As we plan for providing high school education to our students in the future, we would like to know the voters' opinions regarding high school options. The board intends to maintain a school of record, also known as a designated high school, going forward. Question one, no air quotes this time. Question one, to see if the town of Deerfield supports providing additional high school options to students if there is no additional cost to taxpayers. Question two, to see if the town of Deerfield supports providing additional high school options to students if there would be an additional cost of up to $4,000 per student per year.
I would like to make a motion to amend that. And in both the second and, first and second question, to see if the town would, let me look at what you're writing.
You changed it, there's no airport.
Supports providing
there anymore.
an additional high school option. I would like to add in addition to the designated high school into both of those lines, so that it says,
Yeah.
we're talking
Yeah,
about
yeah,
an
yeah.
additional,
Well,
in addition to.
I think
the high school.
we should be using the correct term, which is the school of record. And you provided a
Okay.
definition to school of record in the paragraph immediately preceding that, so let's use correct.
All right, so I make a motion to amend it to include in addition to the school of record in both of those questions.
Second.
So providing additional high school, so I'm just gonna say providing high school options in addition to
The school of
School
record.
of record.
And I
high
second
school options.
motion.
So we are
All in favor?
discussing, go ahead. So, everybody okay with that?
I just have a clarifying question, Patty. What is the criteria to maintain a school of record?
The criteria?
Yeah,
Check.
like the majority of our students still go to one school?
Well,
I think it depends on the contract.
It depends
Okay.
on the school, so in the past, we've had to negotiate with Concord, or we've chosen to negotiate with Concord and ask for a lower number of the percentage. I'm assuming that most high schools, if they're going to be established as your school of record, are going to want the majority of your students to be coming to them. So it's until you negotiate.
Right. And the benefits to having the school of record are,
The students always have a place to go. And they don't if it's open.
right, and I think that I wanted people,
Yeah.
for many
Everyone
people
to
that
hear
are
that.
listening, to
Talking
hear
to
Yeah.
it.
And these contracts also need to be approved by the Department of Education, so we say what it takes. It takes the negotiations, takes the vote, takes approval by the state board.
One more time. Question one, this is the whole thing.
Well, we're still on the amendment, we haven't voted on the amendment. But you can read through with the amendment.
To see if the town of Deerfield supports providing high school options in addition to the school of record to students if there is no additional cost to the taxpayers. Question two, to see if the town of Deerfield supports providing high school options in addition to the school of record to students if there would be an additional cost of up to $4,000 per student per year.
All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
We are back on the original question. Are there any other changes or suggestions to the language?
I think the caveat of the motion would be to have it go through legal D and I.
Could you send those to me right away and I'll get them to him tomorrow? So I'm assuming you'll place this on the warrant and then I will have Dean review it, and unless he says this can't be put on as written, it's all set. I'll make that assumption.
Yes.
And the formatting would come through like this paragraph. I don't know if anybody else ever does this, but a paragraph and then two questions underneath it.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I'll put it through and see what he says.
Would they be question one and question two, or they would be
No,
article
they would
5
be,
and
yeah,
6, or 4,
yeah,
whatever, 4
5
and
and
5?
6.
Okay.
Like, I know some of the zoning amendments include an explanation before, passage of this article and whatever. So I'm sure there's a mechanism.
Any additional questions, amendments? All in favor of adding this as warrant article number 5,
Pending approval by legal.
pending approval by legal?
Aye.
You got it. I think we're done with our warrant articles. All right. Does anybody need a break, or are you good to go? Keep going.
Straight down.
JJIB Athletics, third reading.
Did Cindy have a chance to review the tune-up we did last time around? Does anybody else review the tune-up? Didn't we strike the whole
Yeah, we talked about just eliminating the back
page?
and going with
The handbook.
and putting just the cover page for as the policy.
Okay, so that is still, that's not struck from what we're reading. Or updated from what we're reading.
Well, we just eliminate this, right?
I've eliminated everything. I thought we were leaving one,
Oh, I think you're right.
we were leaving one thing. So I guess,
Bye, Andrea.
Maybe you-
Merry Christmas.
so I guess I have one other, question, and it, I guess it's something that recently came to me is, and I don't know if it's an appropriate place to put it in this policy, but apparently sometimes we have an issue receiving or having uniforms returned, they don't always come back. So I don't know if it would be prudent here to put, something that says that the uniforms are returned at the end of the season.
Let the handbook do that. Let the administration do that.
That was my only comment outside of the changes we did last time.
I still have a philosophical problem with the first sentence of the third paragraph. Students who have any kind of detention on the day of a scheduled game, meet practice, will not be allowed to participate in the activity that day. Because this is different from the punishment that we would dole out for kids that are on academic probation. I do not feel that kids who are on detention should have a lighter punishment than kids who are on academic probation, or maybe kids who are on academic probation should have a chance to have it on a day-to-day basis like that.
Right, it's in contradiction to the last sentence in that same paragraph.
Well, yeah, I mean, those are they're two entirely different. Right now, the probationary period is a full week that you aren't involved.
Well,
The first sentence is,
So-
the days you are out, you don't do it. As soon as you come back, you're in.
We don't really suspend too many students. We do
We do,
suspend
but not-
students here.
no.
Which would be technically a behavioral probation, right? So I get what you're saying, Jim, but would, if we just went with that, took that last sentence from that paragraph, moved it to the first sentence and eliminated the existing first sentence.
Say that again? I'm sorry.
So strike the first sentence,
Correct.
right? Because a detention is a behavioral probation, right? Took the last sentence in the paragraph and made it the first.
Would
That
inherently is
cover-
a paragraph.
I don't think that's true, is it? The behavioral probation is a different deal than a single detention.
Yeah, I don't even know, is that, I don't know what
The
behavioral
pertinent
probation is even
Yeah, I don't know
referring
that
to.
And-
behavioral probation
Well-
is anything.
Yeah, it used to be.
Yeah.
I mean,
Ah.
change the behavioral, that wording of behavioral probation to reflect more accurately, detention's one, to Jim's point, detention's 1 day, suspension is a period of days. If you adopted similar wording in that last sentence to reflect the behavioral correction period, I think that would work.
So, is my understanding that you think a student that receives a detention should still be able to participate in the extracurricular activity?
No, I think the
No.
point he's making is that students get on academic probation for turning in incomplete homework or not getting their schoolwork done.
Right.
Which this seems to carry a heavier weight in terms of penalty than a behavioral infraction, which is hitting somebody or bullying or,
That's what I'm digging into.
okay.
I just wanna, the,
Probation's a little more than that, though.
Okay.
I mean, it's more than that, they've had weeks to make up their missings, they've gone on 1 or 2 on a summative in multiple classes, it's as opposed to the kid who they have go fisticuffs out at the playground over, something that, a
Dodgeball.
disagreement they had, and it's done and it's over, and, somebody who's a frequent flyer is a different situation.
Which is what behavioral probation
That could,
used to be.
probably divided a little bit.
So what's the wish of the board?
I mean, that first sentence is very distinct in mentioning detention, but there are other pieces to the behavioral probation. I guess that's my point, is that last sentence provides the flexibility between the two in the policy, where the first sentence is just, like I said, it's very distinct. It says it's, only for 1 day, to your point, so.
so do you have a
You
motion?
wouldn't even have to move it, you could just leave it where it is. I just strike that.
Well, where it is right now saying that, we're dealing with policy. Right now, it's.
No.
It's.
No, I meant that last sentence, you wouldn't even have to make it the first sentence
So
of the
you're
paragraph.
moving to strike that sentence?
I would actually make a motion to strike the first sentence from the third paragraph.
Which would create a situation where there was no policy that said anybody on detention was
It
removed
says it in the
from
last
office.
sentence.
Says detention in there?
It says behavioral probation.
That there is no definition of that term, that's an old term that isn't used
So,
anymore.
so do you insert such as detention or suspension? Is that part of your motion?
Do I need to retract it and restate it?
No, you're still in the middle, I just jumped in, sorry.
No, it's a good point, and actually, so the motion would be strike the first sentence completely and change the wording in the last sentence from behavioral probation to,
Leave behavioral such as, zero probation such as detention
Oh.
or suspension.
so leave,
So, change it to if a student is on academic or behavioral probation or detention, he or she will
Such
not.
as.
behavioral probation such as detention or suspension.
Such as. He or she will not be
allowed.
allowed to play during the probationary period.
Yep.
Alright, so that's a motion.
Second, sorry.
For discussion purposes, we want to change that language. My take is that is just becoming more punitive. I don't know what I want to do with this, but I don't know.
I have an entirely different, like, whole scope of opinions that I'm kind of sitting on right now.
I think most specifically, targeting just this point, I would think that this might require another policy or somewhere else to define probationary or behavioral probation. If that's not a term that's used by the school right now, then we need
Right.
to, it needs to be defined or something. So I don't know that what we put in there is necessarily enough to define that.
So, without going too deep into my own personal rabbit hole on this, the academic probation component, there has to be some level of consequences, right? But I don't know to what extent, but I also feel like, is the academic probation taking away too much? And so to me, maybe while you're on academic probation, you're allowed to practice, but you don't participate in the game. I don't know exactly to what extent I think it should be, but you're not punishing, you're punishing the student, you're also punishing the team, but showing up, missing a week's worth of practice and then just being able to show up at the next game on Monday and go play again, to me, you should be practicing with the team, being part of the team to the extent that you can be, if we're just talking from an athletic standpoint. I have become very indifferent to the probation policy, so I think there's a bigger conversation at some point.
Alright, so we have a motion to change the language, striking the first sentence, and adding if a student is on academic probation, student is on academic or behavioral probation, such as detention, he/she will not be allowed to play during the probationary period.
Detention or suspension.
You said detention or suspension. Okay, sorry.
You could switch put academic with probation and behavioral instead of having a behavioral probation.
Just be behavioral.
So
disciplines.
if a student has a behavioral consequence such as a detention or a suspension or is on academic probation.
And then you get rid of that weird word that
Yeah.
sounds like you guys aren't using.
You need to amend your motion, if you want to change it to the wording.
Do we need to make a second motion to amend that?
You can amend your motion to change the language at this point.
The second
Or we
motion.
can have a motion to amend.
I will
And
amend,
you can withdraw and resubmit. Let's do that.
alright, I will withdraw my original
Who was
Who
second?
needs to second it?
I was.
Are you withdrawing too?
Yes.
Okay.
and I will make a new motion reflecting
What is it?
the wording of
So if a student has a behavioral consequence such as detention or suspension, or is on academic probation, he or she will not be allowed to play during the probationary period.
The student has a
Behavioral consequence,
behavioral consequence.
Such as,
detention or suspension.
Such as detention or suspension, or is on academic probation, he or she will not be allowed to play during the probationary period. Is that what you want, Ken?
Yes.
while striking the first sentence.
While striking the first sentence?
Yeah.
Do you have a second?
Sure.
All right, now we were discussing, go ahead, Nate.
I don't know that I can vote to make this change until I've heard from the administration, so I don't know, if you wanted to speak to it, I'd be curious what your thoughts are on this, or if you want to just sit on it for, what is it, 3 weeks till our next meeting, but I would be curious what your thoughts are on how this, or from the athletic director. Does this make sense?
Is everybody okay hearing from the administration on this one?
Yeah, and then potentially, if we could bring the policy with everything struck and cleaned up.
Well, we haven't made any changes yet, so hold on a second. Dave has asked Kristen and Patty to weigh in on this amendment change that we have on the table. So that's what we're working on, is this amendment to the policy. What are your thoughts on this amendment? If you don't have answers tonight, we can come back.
Yeah, I would rather talk to the athletic director. There's a reason why she wanted to bring this policy forward for an update, so I'd like to talk with her, Mr. Grieve.
So, we have an amendment, we have a motion for an amendment to JJIB on the table. We could make a motion to table, and we would be in the middle of an amendment, or we can take a vote on it right now.
I would vote on the
All right,
amendment.
so all in favor of the change, the motion that Ken put forward, say aye. All opposed?
Yay.
Can you vote?
Aye.
Oh, you said yes?
I said aye.
You said yes? Okay. 3 said yes, 2 said no.
So
We are, so that change is made, but we have not adopted the policy.
Right.
Is there a motion to table this?
yes.
I motion, yeah, okay, second.
So, all in favor of tabling this until next meeting? Okay. All right, that was fun. It's all Robert rules of order, isn't that? Hopefully I did that right. There we go. GBA, job description paragraph.
So the next two are going to require some committee work, and they are not ready.
Okay. JLDBB, suicide prevention, first reading.
Yes, and that's as a result of a new statute. We left the notes in there so that you could see, RSA 193-J, among other things, requires that the school district develops a policy to coordinate, plan to prevent, assess the risk of intervening in and respond to suicide. So that's written by the School Boards Association as a response to that, and it's on for a first reading.
All right, that does it for policies. Informational items.
All right.
Go right ahead.
They're great informational items. So the first one is to publicly thank Jess Dickey, who received commendation from the Department of Education, and she served as the chair of the Visual Arts Writing Team for developing the revised New Hampshire K-12 art standards. So
That's awesome.
she got a nice letter of kudos and did great work that was appreciated. And the second piece of great news is that Karen Gersha, our Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, was just named the New Hampshire Special Ed Administrator of the Year.
Wow.
So we'll be going to the Eddies again.
Nice. Awesome. Good for her.
So two great pieces of
Is
info.
she bringing her favorite school?
It's gonna be a big table. Or multiple tables.
Any additional informational items? I would like to bring up something we talked about a couple of months ago, which was a really fun conversation, and we didn't go anywhere because we didn't know where we were on budget. We had this fantastic presentation from Patty and Kristen in regards to educational space and how to create educational space and all of the cool thoughts and the boards and everything that they had put up. And at the end of it, we thought about how can this board empower the teachers and help them. And we kicked around the idea of some sort of a reward or some sort of come to us with a really creative educational way to change your classroom around this thought process. And at that point, we didn't know where we were at the budget. We now know that we are running with a surplus. So I would like to, I don't know if we want to do it tonight or if add it to the next agenda. I would like to solidify a board award for classroom furniture for like creative classroom solutions. I don't remember exactly how. Do you remember how we kind of worded it last time? Kristen, do you remember where we were with that?
Yeah, I have to look back on my.
I think it was kind of like for, curriculum innovations. If people were looking like they might need a little bit of financial things that they didn't originally planned for in their budget in order to innovate.
Right.
That we could, I think Patty, you talked about that other boards oftentimes do it. They create these like micro grants from the board.
As an in-house type of.
So I am happy to make a motion tonight, but if you guys want to talk through it at the next meeting.
But you want to address it as a case-by-case thing and say.
Well, I would like to kind of create like a mini grant program. I think that's pretty much what we had talked about last time, and maybe run, $3,000 grants that teachers would have to come to the administration with the creative idea of how they're going to improve their curriculum or their classroom, or just what's interesting, what do you really want to bite into, and what will come to us with an idea and a budget, and the board has funded 3 opportunities for you to really make a change in your class.
So is that a motion?
Yeah, I'll make it as a motion. Go ahead. So I move that the board creates a mini grant program funded at $3,000 for $3,000 grants to encourage innovation within the classroom at the discretion of the administration.
Who would be the
You gotta
attorney
say a second
who's
first.
distributing?
I'll second the motion so we can discuss
Who would be distributing it? The
Yeah.
administration.
So the administration makes a decision, so it's not coming before the board to hear about the idea, it's the administration's approval.
I want the administration. I mean, we're not the decision makers in the classroom on cutting edge education. So I want you guys to have something. Let's do something cool.
Are you saying 3,000 or 1,000?
Well, I was saying 1,000.
Yep.
I'm flexible. What do you think?
I think 1,000 is reasonable.
Start there.
Yeah. $1,000 can go.
Good news is if we do this, I hope you run out of money quickly.
Yeah.
And you have
I
to come to
probably
us
will.
looking for more.
And tell them to come with really good ideas.
Mhm.
Encourage them.
And do you want me to present their ideas to the board, or do you want them to come?
I would love if we heard what you decided.
Okay.
And then would the teachers come and present in
Here's-
June? If
they want to.
I wonder whether this.
I don't want to make it like, oh my God, you have to do a presentation and blah blah blah. If they want to come and show us, that's great. If they don't, I'll trust that
I
they'll
would-
get good things.
I would like to, sorry, Nate. I would like to see it more as they got the award and
The grant.
whatever, they got the grant and this was their plan and we see the final product.
Mhm.
That's what you actually put it in
in play and how did it work and what was the improvement? Or how did it change the classroom? I would like to see the final product.
But see, I want, my intent with this is to be risk takers. To have something created, and if it doesn't work, you've learned from it. That's fine. I don't want them to feel like they have to come to us and be like, I saw a 20% return in my reading nook,
Right.
or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Be creative. Use it to push it.
In terms of semantics, does it require setting up, I mean, are you proposing, this isn't part of the motion, I think, but are we talking about an annual thing? If it is, are we?
Right now, this is a one-off.
Okay.
But if it's successful,
The board can make a motion to continue it and fund it on a regular basis.
Are we setting dates for when it was dissolved to the administration?
Well, starting this.
I said at the discretion of the administration.
Okay.
I think I said that.
Do you want a primary and intermediate in the middle school, or just first come, first serve?
I don't think it's first come, first served. It's most creative
Okay.
person.
Okay.
It's what,
We can put criteria in place,
Okay,
the
that'd be
deadline
good,
and all that.
if you guys wanna come to us and be like, here's what we think,
Yeah.
how we're gonna judge it. Does it sound like a good idea to you?
Let's do it on a Friday morning.
Okay.
Over coffee.
In Scone.
There's no coffee and scones when I show up here on Friday mornings.
Why?
Wait a minute.
What's
What?
that?
You haven't heard about Monday through Thursday?
All of a sudden on Friday, everything's ratcheted right up. All right, keep it straight, guys. No scones.
Gee,
This might be another informational,
well, we need to vote.
oh,
You're going
sorry,
somewhere else.
sorry, yes, sorry, let's get the vote.
So all we're doing right now is voting on the
$3,000
money, and everything is at the discretion of the administration to come back to
Well-
us with a proposal.
I think we've created enough of an outline in this discussion. Do you feel like you have an outline? Do you feel like it's totally enough?
For instance, we sound split on whether there would be a presentation or not. I agree with your point that I would like it to be more risk-taking and therefore not committed to a presentation if it doesn't work, or they can
As
just,
the motion maker, I had no intention for making anybody come with a presentation. I would welcome a
So maybe
presentation.
you could
But I
decide
will
whether.
absolutely not require.
Oh, you should see
The,
this.
the, my intent in requesting a presentation is to make sure that the money was well spent.
You're a data guy.
I am a data guy.
I agree. I think that they, I trust that you guys will find something creative. And if it doesn't work, that's great. You learn from things that don't work.
I think that was part of what we talked about at Harvard, that it is okay to do, you may fail, but you learn from that, and you don't, unless you create a platform that you can be a risk taker, then creative new innovative ideas will not move forward.
We're talking about $3,000 here.
Right.
Have fun.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You got it.
Lose your mind.
$1,000.
I was gonna go.
No, that's good.
All right.
Go bonkers.
Other information, Gigi.
So I think, if I recollect clearly, that I believe it was our last meeting, people felt like they were intent on maybe having a work session on the academic probation piece. So I just didn't know if that's an agenda item that can we get that on the agenda so that that discussion can,
You wanna tackle it at the next meeting?
yeah.
We are done with budget. We are done with
Warrants, we have nothing to do.
warrants.
Let's talk about
It's-
homework too.
It starts getting,
part of that. Part of that
we
conversation.
can get even more philosophical. So, let's finish up here. Would you like to see it on the next agenda?
I would like us to have a work session on it so that we can maybe get the information that we need. Because oftentimes I feel like, I know for me, I can only speak for me personally, I feel like I'm working in an evidence void. I don't have information.
As a work session, do you mean like a small group that
splits off and kind of does a deep dive and then comes back and has a conversation with the full board, or are you talking about the full board
Well,
doing a deep dive?
the full board taking a deep dive, we had just kind of decided that there were, times where we have single things that we were in general talking about, and then more formally, like this meeting is a formal meeting, but then a more informal meeting where we can just kind of take a deeper dive and not make everybody else crazy and doesn't,
We kind of had those as our second meetings of the month.
yeah.
So do you want to do the January meeting and then the second meeting in January, kind of work on that? If
Yeah.
we do a second meeting in January?
I was gonna actually bring up whether or not we need a first meeting in January, because it's right after we come back from vacation,
Nothing's going to happen.
not here.
All in favor of canceling the January 8th meeting? Is that the date, January 8th?
Yeah, the 7th, 8th, and 9th, because it would have been a fun week for me.
Is the seventh is the
NBC.
The 7th, we present, the 7th, I'll present the warrant articles to the NBC for their recommendations, and then on the 9th, the NBC holds the public hearing prior to finalizing basically the budget and the budgets and sending them to the deliberative.
Now, there is the small chance that the NBC could change the budget again on the 7th, right?
They can change it after the public hearing.
Not to the public.
They could change it after the public hearing, right? So somebody that voted in the affirmative for the budget would have to vote to reopen the budget. And they would have to pass motions. There's a lot of steps prior to, so I would think it's probably unlikely.
Okay.
And if that was the case, I think you'd have to call a meeting, and we would have to end up meeting right after the public hearing in that case.
So what
Amend our recommendations.
do you think about
The other, we just talked about a mailing of some sort. I'm happy to work on it, but it would be good to, there are things that we're working on, and so, if you think we don't need, that's fine, but I feel like we have stuff to do, so I don't know.
You could also do your philosophical talk on the 8th, and there's nothing else that's
I
happening.
think that's a little fast after vacation, because I feel like there's some work that administration needs to do, I would like to do before you have that conversation.
Big ask.
So, do we still want to have a meeting on the 8th? What do you think? That's not,
Sure, no, it's fine.
I don't think we need the meeting on the 8th.
no?
I was really looking forward to it.
Yes or no?
Oh, well, just for fun, I'm gonna say yes.
Alright, so we're not having a meeting.
Can I come back to this question of Katie's? I would be concerned with having a large full table work session conversation about this. Just not, and so I guess Patty, you just mentioned, without having kind of a lot of information. At some level, this isn't really I feel like we're too 30,000 foot-ish for this conversation. And I'm not sure what, in terms of a work session, what would we hope to accomplish? Other than, I guess, hearing from the administration about the school and but I mean, I don't know. I guess my question is, what do we hope to get out of this, other than hearing what the school wants and needs from us? And that's my perspective, is that nobody's coming to us with a desire to change anything. I think the parents are, some parents are. So what would we be trying to accomplish? I think versus sort of a smaller group kind of a work session, which maybe has some parent input. I don't even know what this would look like, but as a board, I don't really see where that would go. I'm not sure what to do about that. I don't really know what I just said, but I'm just not sure that a word I don't know. This
So I think
The only reason I brought it up is because I was sitting at a meeting, last meeting, and
So we put that in the park.
there were 3 people who went, but we will have a conversation about that, but we will have a conversation about, but we will have a conversation about that. And as long as I've been here, there seems to be a desire to have a conversation, and maybe it's not necessarily about academic probation itself, but there seems to be a desire to have some conversation about the connection, maybe a broader understanding of perhaps where we're at with the connection between competency-based education and how it plays out on our students. Academic probation perhaps maybe being
a component.
of that.
So
And
the agenda could be superagenda when we work on something like, yeah, I hear you, yeah.
so, to Gigi's point, and she is 100% accurate, we have placed that item in the parking lot. I think that was the term you used, or you used in particular.
Yes, yeah.
We have put that item in the parking lot and pushed all the snow in front of it a few times. And so we had a few items in that parking lot. One of them was this broader high school conversation, which we are slowly inching our way towards that deeper discussion. And so that is most certainly one of our other parking lot items that at some point we need to discuss. And I think it's not the probation policy per se, it's how competencies are working in our school and how that's affecting, or how that works within the student experience. It's the larger picture. I mean, we've been playing with competencies my entire time on the board, and obviously our work started a little bit before. But I think it's just time to throw the ball around.
Hey, so this was a long time ago. It's like 4 years ago, I think, when I first came on the board. And we had kind of this whiteboard session with some sort of a person, a moderator, a facilitator who came in. And I feel like what we did during that time was we looked at, our challenges and our strengths, and it was that kind of like a strategic planning mini thing almost. Swap it, whatever, yeah. And I thought that was a good kind of structure to look at all these pieces and to try to develop a larger picture about where we are, what we have working for us, how we can maybe start to coordinate and make things. And I feel like from that we had a good kind of plan that came from it. It was almost like a 3 or 5 year plan or something. I felt like things came out of that and we were on the same page for a while. But I think I agree with Gigi that I am unclear about kind of what is the larger sense, how all this ties together, like you just said. And so that kind of maybe that would be a way to structure this kind of meeting that we're talking about. I don't know.
I'm just wondering what it looks like to have a board conversation about this. So what are you going to talk about in terms of competency-based education, how it works in our school?
Because such a good chance, you have no idea what we're going to talk
Well,
about.
no, and I don't mean that.
We're going to wander.
That's what I'm wondering. Like, what would a board conversation look like? Is it more specific questions you have, data you want us to gather, that we could give a presentation or have the experts in the room that could answer your questions?
I think from the high level, the big question is it working? Is this an effective model for our school? Is that too general?
Are you talking about competency-based education
Yeah,
as an
that's a
effective
big-
model? Or are you talking about, okay,
I don't know.
just putting it out there.
Guys,
And maybe the questions may be generated by the conversation as well.
should we do another?
That's-
It almost. I think we should have a meeting where we look at our goals again for this year, and we look at that SWOT analysis that we did, and we look at kind of what the next 3 to 4 months kind of rolls out, and base our discussion off of that. Does that sound more? And I think that big philosophical questions will come out of that. But
I think Patty raises a good point. What value?
What are we going to accomplish?
Right, exactly. What value are we going to bring? Because it's not
are we
like,
changing the policy?
Are we
What
changing the
policies
policy?
do we want?
or are we
from us?
providing guidance? Because that's really what we're
Policy
about, what
and
we're
budget.
supposed to be.
I guess
doing.
I think part of why I asked that was, so what is your guidance based on? If you're saying you have a lack of understanding about maybe the overall system and how it's working, how would you provide guidance to, like, you know, is it,
Right,
is
no,
it,
I
you know,
agree.
we're hearing from the community that X isn't working, so what guidance would you give? Or is it, okay, we're hearing from the community that there are concerns about probation, can you please get us some data regarding probation? Can you, you know, Chris Motika is the expert here, so do we have him come in and start doing a deeper dive into how competency-based ed is working, work with the middle school, get the data on probation? I guess that's what I'm looking for, is what's the product? And how are we going to have
And this isn't gonna be done for our second January meeting, and this is bigger, that conversation is way bigger.
We have all of Christmas break.
I know, that's a good point, I take that back.
Were you just talking about all this free time?
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, I'm just kind of going for what I'm hearing, and I'm just trying to put pieces together. I heard board members at the last meetings be very passionate about, and we will have a discussion about that. We had a bunch of parents behind us at one point talking about that. I thought Kristen did a great job. I wish they would all have stayed so that she could have seen the presentation on Alma and information about how academic probation works and formatives and so on and so forth. And so I guess for me, I continue, like, I've been generating questions. I've been trying to, like, keep track of questions that come up for me, like, of things I don't understand, so that if in fact people are looking at policies such as academic probation, I need to feel like I could make an informed decision about a policy. Right now, I don't think I could make an informed decision about a policy because I don't feel like I have enough data or evidence or understanding of the process. So that's really why I brought it up in terms of, and maybe it's several work sessions over the course of time. But that's really why I brought it up.
So can we have some initial data at the second January meeting? Which is now the first January
I
meeting?
think the question is, what do you want? What data do you want? What information do you want?
So what data do you think would help you make it?
But what area do you want to tackle, and then what data do we need?
I would throw that question back at you.
You me or him?
Him, throw it at him.
I'll answer the question. So, I think
What's in the parking lot? That's
right, you want
which car in the parking lot do you want to dig out first?
So, to answer both those questions, for me personally, I think the way we have probation written sounds like it should be effective, right? And then we're hearing on the other side of the spectrum and I've heard from a number of parents, that it is not effective. And so at some point, mediation has to occur in between, and we need to determine, is it effective? And there's a misunderstanding. Is it ineffective and they have a strong understanding, but they're coming to, at least I'm hearing from a number of parents as a board member, and they're saying, this isn't working. And I'm looking over here and I'm going, well, on paper, this should be working. And it's not. So to me, like, if I'm going to dive into something, that would be something I'd want to discuss. I am not saying that the probation policy isn't appropriate, but there's a disconnect somewhere, and I feel like it needs to be reconnected, sorted out, looked at, discussed. I think is probably the best way to put it. So that would be one thing, like, you want to know what I would want to see is data and involving or information or to further that conversation, because we're most certainly, it seems as if we have a large enough group of parents, or enough of them have approached me and said something, where we are potentially disenfranchising a number of our students. And I do not like the idea of us disenfranchising our students. And I want to get comfortable with that situation, how that situation's working, and whether that is, I need to get happier with that, for lack of a better term. So to me, that would be my hot
So what is it the administration can pull together? Is it the number of kids who are on academic probation?
So what,
The communication, like the communication with the parents in regards to
So,
what's going on?
like for me, if I was gonna look for raw numbers, I would want to look at, we've had 4 or 5 maybe probation periods, I'd say this year, right? I don't know the exact number, but
By now, yeah.
by now, somewhere around there. So for each one of those probation periods, how many students were on probation in each grade level? How many subjects in each grade level? It's 2 to be placed on probation, but, is there students with 4 subjects or 5? I don't know that I need to know which subjects specifically, but like, were half the students on for subject A, B, or C, and then the second subject was always D. Like, we don't need to get into specifics because I don't want it to be anything that could identify a particular staff member, because it's a public conversation.
Oh, well, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So-
No, I was
So I
thinking
don't want
subject.
anything that would identify a staff member, but you could very easily say, okay, we had 20 kids on probation, 5 were in subject A, 5 were in subject B, 5 were in subject C, and 17 were in subject D. Well, then at that point, the conversation can shift to what's going on with subject D. And then the administration can maybe go back and participate in a deeper dive and try to figure out what's going on. Because I suspect that what we're hearing from parents and it's a disconnect in the way it's executed, and whether it's a disconnect in how that information is being uploaded into Alma, whether it's a disconnect in the interpretation of what satisfies complete versus not complete. Is it black? Is it white? Is it a level of gray in between? And so I'm not trying to single out a staff member, I'm not trying to but I think we owe it to the parents to mediate somewhere in between. And so that, I guess, would be the start of my query.
This is a hell of an information line. Yes.
So I'm afraid that's getting really far down in the detail for our job description.
I don't disagree with you that may not be the 30,000-foot view, but to me, enough parents have expressed concern. And when I've said to those parents, will you, say something in public comments, and a large number of them have responded with, I do not want to go to a board meeting and talk about my kid.
Yeah.
And so that's why, to me, if we just turn it all into, it's A's and B's and C's and factors and numbers, and it's not about particular students, it's not about it's not about an identifiable subject, it's just it's a series of variables, and we can look for a common denominator and see if something makes sense.
Wait, so the question is
All right,
this,
guys,
Are we non-informational? Like, where did we go?
we're off, I'm sorry, I'm tired. We need to stop. We need to either, we can address this in January, February, but we are not having this full discussion tonight, which is what.
so you want this discussion on the January meeting?
Well,
And
I
then
think,
I think we Jeej wanted to spend some time as a board talking about things. Why don't we say the first February meeting, because our second January meeting is going to be kind of the first January meeting, if you know what I mean. Like, we've canceled January 8th, the January 20th or whatever it is. 22nd is going to be the first meeting where we do all of our business and stuff. The February meeting after that, we can get into a discussion. Does that work for everybody?
Yes, I think the point was, the question that was asked was, what would we be interested in? So I think people were trying to answer the question, what are you interested in hearing about? So I think we'll have to get back to answering that question at some point. I don't know how we'll get back to answering that, if that is, so should people email questions to you and then that's in preparation
I think
for?
we all have a sense of what the conversation is going to be about. So that is a perfect idea. You can email Patty and say, hey, I'm curious about this. Is this relevant to the conversation? And Patty can respond, it's probably not relevant, or it is relevant, or I might have that for you. But actually, you guys can email me individually and I will pass it. How does that sound? That way, if there's redundancy and if it's totally out of left field, we can kind of try to hurt it a little bit. Does that work? Everybody? Okay. Any other informational items tonight? Public comments? Candy?
Seeing none?
Non-public, do we need it? No.
No.
Do we?
Does anybody need a non-public? I'm fine with that one. Appointments, resignations? Adjournment?
Oh, so moved. Oh my God.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're done. 8:45.